In the tunnels under Cu Chi, the pistol the Army handed you could get you killed before the enemy ever did. Its muzzle flash blinded you in the dark, and the report inside packed earth felt like a slap to both ears. So the tunnel rats went looking for something quieter, and some broke the rules to get it. Number 15 is a pistol the CIA issued that made almost no sound at all, and number 3 was carried into the water by men who were never officially there. By the time we reach number 1, you will meet the only handgun the Army ever built for the tunnels themselves. Let's go into the dark. Number 20. The Army sent its men into the tunnels with the Colt 1911, a .45 caliber pistol that had served since before either World War, and in open ground it was a fine weapon. Underground it was a liability. In a passage barely wide enough to crawl, the muzzle flash of that heavy round bloomed like a flashbulb and stole a man's night vision, and the report inside a dirt shaft felt like a physical blow to both ears. A tunnel rat with the 1st Infantry Division near Cu Chi in 1966 described firing once and then lying blind in the black, listening for the enemy he could no longer see. The pistol did not fail. It simply was not built for a hole in the ground. The .45 stayed the official sidearm of the United States military until 1985, when a 9mm Beretta finally replaced it, and surplus 1911s went on to become some of the most collected handguns in America. But the men who carried it into the tunnels had already passed their verdict 2 full decades before the Pentagon reached the same one. Number 19. So they reached for a revolver. The Smith & Wesson Model 10, a .38 caliber wheel gun that American police had carried on quiet city streets for half a century, became the unofficial pistol of the tunnel rats. Its appeal was simple. A revolver could be pressed against a dirt wall or an enemy's body and fired again and again without jamming, where an automatic might catch it slide and die at the worst possible moment, jammed against the very enemy it was meant to stop. Crawlers with the 25th Infantry Division kept the Model 10 loaded with lighter wad-cutter target rounds, because the softer load flashed less and kicked less in the black. The gun was never officially issued for tunnel work. Men bought them, borrowed them, or quietly signed them out of stocks meant for military police. Today, the Model 10 is remembered as one of the most produced handguns in history. 6 million made, sitting in nightstands and evidence lockers around the world. Almost none of its owners know that a handful of them once went down into the earth of Vietnam and crawled back out. Number 18. The problem with any service revolver underground was length. A 4-inch barrel snagged on roots and caught on the lip of every trap door, and in a tunnel, a man needs one hand for a light and cannot spare the other. The Colt Detective Special solved it. This was a .38 built with a stubby 2-inch barrel and a rounded frame, designed in the 1920s for plainclothes officers who needed a gun that vanished under a jacket. In the crawl spaces beneath Tay Ninh province, it became something else. A pistol short enough to swing around in a space where a man could not turn his shoulders. A rat could hold the light in his left hand and the snub in his right and still fit through a gap the width of his hips. The short barrel cost him range he was never going to use, since most tunnel fights happened at arm's length. After the war, it kept selling to the very detectives it was named for, until Colt ended production in 1995. Its wartime detour stayed a private thing, known only to the men who lived it. Number 17. The Smith & Wesson Model 15 came to Vietnam through a side door. It was the combat masterpiece, a .38 revolver the United States Air Force adopted for its security police and air crews, prized for a smooth action and adjustable sights that let a shooter place a round precisely. Precision was not what a tunnel rat needed most, but availability was, and where Air Force stocks and Army tunnels sat close together, a few of these revolvers drifted from one to the other. A door gunner who transferred to a ground unit outside Bien Hoa was said to have carried his Model 15 down 3 tunnels before anyone up the chain noticed it had left the flight line. The gun's real fame came later and elsewhere. The Model 15 served as a standard American police sidearm well into the 1980s and became the issue revolver of entire departments. Collectors now prize the Vietnam-era examples, the ones with military acceptance marks stamped into the frame. A revolver built for a cockpit ended up in the one place on Earth with no sky above it at all. Number 16. Not every pistol in the tunnels came from an American armory. The Type 54 was a Chinese copy of the Soviet Tokarev, a 7.62mm automatic that the People's Republic shipped south by the crate to arm the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong. It was a hard-hitting pistol with a distinctive bottle-necked cartridge that could punch clean through a helmet, and captured examples were treasured. An American who took a Type 54 off a fallen enemy officer near the Iron Triangle held something no supply sergeant could give him: an untraceable pistol that fired ammunition he could resupply from the same men he was fighting. Some tunnel rats carried a captured Type 54 as a second gun for exactly that reason. Bringing one home was a different matter. Capture papers, a signed certificate proving the weapon was taken in combat, were the only thing standing between a veteran and a federal charge, and thousands of these pistols came back to the States in footlockers with that single sheet folded inside. Many still sit in family collections, the papers long since lost. Number 15. Deep in the war, there was a pistol that barely made a sound, and the men who carried it were rarely on any official roster. The high-standard HDM was a .22 caliber automatic with a suppressor built right into the barrel, a design that traced back to the spies of the Second World War, quietly handed to the Central Intelligence Agency and Special Forces teams in Vietnam. Fired, it produced little more than the clack of its own slide, a sound swallowed by jungle or the closed air of a tunnel. A studies and observations group team along the Cambodian border used one for tasks no press release would ever describe: removing a sentry or a tracker dog without alerting the men 50 feet away. The HDM was never a battlefield pistol. It was a tool for silence. After the war, its suppressor made it a federally regulated item under the National Firearms Act. So a legal HDM today demands a tax stamp and a paper trail. There is a strange irony there. A gun designed so nothing about its use would be written down, now impossible to own without a file. Number 14. Stay with me, because the deeper we crawl, the stranger these guns become. The Tokarev T-33 was the original that the Chinese Type 54 had copied, a Soviet service pistol handed to North Vietnamese officers as a badge of rank as much as a weapon. It had no external safety in the way a Western shooter would expect, and it carried its powerful cartridge in a slim frame that rode easily in a waistband. To an American tunnel rat, a captured Tokarev meant the same thing a captured Type 54 did: a deniable pistol and free ammunition. But the Tokarev carried a second value. It was proof. An officer's sidearm taken in a tunnel told the intelligence men that a command post had been down there, not just a lone fighter. A crawler with the 1st Cavalry Division reportedly handed his captured Tokarev straight to an interrogation team rather than keep it for himself. The pistol outlived the war by decades. Surplus Tokarevs flooded the American market in the 1990s from former Eastern Bloc stocks, cheap and plentiful, their Vietnam cousins standing invisible in the same crowd. Number 13. The Browning High Power was the most respected pistol in the theater, and it belonged to everyone. Designed in Belgium and finished after its inventor's own death, it was a 9mm automatic that held 13 rounds when most service pistols held 7 or 8. And that magazine made it a favorite of South Vietnamese officers, Special Forces advisors, and the men of the Studies and Observations Group. An ARVN Ranger captain in the Mekong Delta might wear one as a mark of standing, while an American recon man valued it because it carried nearly twice the ammunition of the government .45. Some tunnel teams chose the high power for that reason alone. Since a man in a hole could not reload easily and every extra round mattered, the pistol had already carried the French through the First Indochina War a decade earlier, so in a sense, it never left. The high power stayed in production until 2017, one of the longest-serving handgun designs ever made, and the battered examples that came home from Vietnam are now among the most sought after by collectors who understand exactly where they had been. Number 12. To understand the next pistol, you have to remember that America was the second Western Army to fight in Vietnam, not the first. The MAC-50 was the standard French service automatic, a 9mm pistol adopted in 1950 and carried by French troops through the brutal years that ended at Dien Bien Phu in 1954. When France withdrew, its arsenals did not all go home. Thousands of MAC-50s and older French pistols stayed behind in the hands of the South Vietnamese forces that inherited the war, and a decade later, American advisors found their allies still wearing them. An ARVN officer near Hue in 1967 might carry a French pistol older than the conflict he was fighting, resupplied by a country that had already given up on the place. For a tunnel rat, a French automatic was one more untraceable option in a war full of them. These pistols are rare in America today, since few came back through official channels. When one surfaces, its story is almost always the same: a weapon that fought 2 wars under 2 flags and watched both of them lost. Number 11. The Walther PPK was never a military pistol, and that was exactly the point. It was a small German automatic, elegant enough that it became famous in the movies as a fictional spy's gun, chambered for a modest cartridge and sized to disappear into a coat pocket. In Vietnam, it turned up in the hands of officers, advisors, and intelligence men who wanted a backup weapon that drew no attention. Something to carry when the moment called for a pistol, but not for a soldier. A few found their way into tunnel kits as a last resort gun, small enough to ride in a boot or a shirt. The PPK's American story took a sharp turn in 1968, when the Gun Control Act set import rules that barred the pocket-sized version from being brought into the country, cutting off the pipeline of war souvenirs almost overnight. Veterans who had already mailed one home found themselves holding a pistol that no one else could legally import again. Scarcity did the rest. The wartime PPKs became quiet heirlooms, passed down with a story and a nervous glance at the paperwork in the box. Number 10. On the other side of the line, the Makarov was the pistol of a rising officer. The Soviet Union introduced this compact 9mm automatic in the 1950s and supplied it to North Vietnamese commanders as the older Tokarevs were phased out. So a captured Makarov near the end of the war signaled that a man of some rank had been present when it was taken. It was a simple, rugged pistol built to keep working through mud and neglect. With a fixed barrel and a heavy trigger, a shooter simply learned to live with. American tunnel rats who took one prized it for the same deniability every captured gun offered. But the Makarov also became a trophy of a different order, a sign that the enemy's command structure reached all the way down into the tunnels. Decades later, the Makarov became one of the most familiar imported surplus pistols in America, sold by the thousands after the Cold War ended. The plain ones on the shelves and the rare ones with Vietnam capture papers look identical. Only the folded certificate in the box tells you which war a particular pistol actually saw. Number 9. Some of the pistols in this war were older than the grandfathers fighting it. The Nagant M1895 was a 7-round revolver designed in the 19th century for the armies of Imperial Russia, and by the time it reached the Viet Cong through the long chain of communist aid, it was already an antique. Yet it had one strange virtue almost no other revolver possessed. Its cylinder sealed forward against the barrel as it fired, closing the gap that made other revolvers loud, which meant that of all the wheel guns on Earth, this ancient design was one of the very few that could be made to run quiet. In the hands of a guerrilla who needed to kill without announcing it, that mattered a great deal. American troops who captured a Nagant often did not grasp what they were holding, an obsolete pistol that happened to solve a problem their own engineers were still chasing. The Nagant survives today as a cheap curiosity on collector tables, valued at less than many modern pistols. The ones that came out of Vietnam carry a weight the price tag never shows. Number 8. If this countdown is making you look differently at the pistols in your own family's past, that is the whole point, and I would genuinely like to know in the comments whether a father or grandfather ever carried one of these home. Now, the Smith & Wesson Model 39 was the first American 9mm automatic to truly matter, a sleek pistol adopted by a handful of police departments, and then noticed by exactly the kind of men who worked in the shadows of Vietnam. Navy advisors and early special operations teams carried it, and its light aluminum frame and double-action trigger brought it into a fight faster than the old 45. The Model 39 mattered most for what it became. Naval engineers took this very pistol and rebuilt it into a suppressed weapon for one secret job, and that project appears later at a number you will not want to miss. On its own, it went on to a long civilian life and founded a whole family of Smith & Wesson automatics. But its quiet military service in Vietnam is the part the catalogs always leave out. Number 7. The Colt Cobra was the detective special with its weight cut away. Colt took that same short-barreled .38, gave it a frame of aluminum alloy in place of steel, and produced a revolver light enough to carry all day and forget it was there. For a soldier already loaded down with a rifle, ammunition, water, and a light, a few ounces saved on a backup pistol was worth real money. The Cobra rode in shoulder holsters and pockets across Vietnam as the gun a man reached for when his primary weapon was gone or jammed, and in a tunnel where every ounce had to be dragged through the dirt, its lightness was a genuine advantage. The trade-off was recoil, since a lighter gun kicks harder, but a tunnel rat firing at arm's length was not worried about a careful second shot. The Cobra earned a grim footnote when a version of it was used to kill Lee Harvey Oswald, filmed live on television in 1963. The Vietnam Cobras never made the news. They did their work in the dark and came home in duffel bags, if they came home at all. Number 6. Here's another ghost the French left behind. The MAS Modèle 1935 was a French service automatic from the 1930s, chambered for an unusual small cartridge almost no other country used, which made it both distinctive and a nuisance to keep fed. Like the later Mac 50, it stayed in Vietnam long after the men who first brought it had gone, filtering into ARVN units and militia hands that took whatever the war put in front of them. An American working alongside a South Vietnamese regional force outside Da Nang might see one of these pre-war pistols still riding on a hip, its odd ammunition scrounged from caches decades old. For the rare tunnel rat who ended up with one, it was less a chosen weapon than an accident of whatever was lying around. That strange cartridge is the reason so few survive in shooting condition today. Collectors who own a Modèle 1935 often keep it unfired, a museum piece more than a working gun. It is a reminder that the American war was layered on top of an older one, and that some of its weapons were already fighting on borrowed time. Number 5. The Ruby was the pistol nobody planned for and everybody somehow had. It was a cheap Spanish automatic chambered for the small .32 cartridge, churned out by the hundreds of thousands during the First World War to arm French soldiers. And like so much else, it drifted east and stayed. By the American War, Ruby-type pistols were scattered through Vietnam among village militia, ARVN irregulars, and anyone who needed a gun and could not afford to be choosy. Its value to a tunnel rat was pure deniability. A pistol with no traceable issue, firing common ammunition that could be left behind without a report ever being filed, was worth more than a finer gun that led back to a name. The Ruby was never a fine weapon. It was made down to a price and it showed. But it was everywhere, and it asked no questions of the man who picked it up. Today these pistols are close to worthless on the collector market, common and crude. The irony is that their very cheapness was the thing that made them useful in a war fought in the shadows. Number 4. Not every deniable pistol was a foreign cast-off. The Ruger Standard was an American .22 automatic, a civilian target and plinking pistol that the young company Sturm Ruger had introduced in 1949 and sold cheaply to the public, precisely because it was a civilian gun with no military markings anywhere on it. It became a quiet favorite of men who wanted a weapon that could not be traced to any armory. Special operations soldiers and advisors bought them privately or received them through channels that kept no records, valuing the low report and the total absence of a paper trail. In a tunnel, a .22 was not the hammer a man wanted for a stand-up fight, but for close, quiet work, it had its place, and it weighed almost nothing on the crawl. The Ruger Standard went on to become one of the most successful American pistols ever made, its descendants still in production today, and sitting in millions of homes as a first gun for new shooters. The plain little pistol that taught a generation to shoot had a second, silent career its owners were never told about. Number 3. This is the one the Model 39 was pointing toward. Late in the war, the United States Navy rebuilt that pistol into the Mark 22 Mod 0, a suppressed 9mm for the SEAL teams working the rivers and rice paddies of the Mekong Delta. The men called it the Hush Puppy because its first job was to silence the sentry dogs and geese that guarded enemy positions before they could raise an alarm. It fired heavy, slow rounds through a long suppressor, and a small lock let the shooter hold the slide shut so that not even the click of the action would carry across the water. A SEAL slipping up on a bunker could remove a threat and leave behind nothing but silence. The Hush Puppy was one of the most secret small arms of the war, held tightly long after the shooting stopped. Today, an authentic example is a federally regulated weapon and a museum-grade rarity, worth a fortune to the few collectors ever permitted to own one. It was built to make certain a sound was never heard. History found out about it anyway. Number 2. When everything else was gone, there was the hideout gun. Tiny automatics chambered for the .25 cartridge, small enough to close a fist around, had been made by Colt and European makers for decades. The pistol a person carried when anything larger was impossible. In Vietnam, these little guns rode in boots, in shirt pockets, taped inside a helmet, the absolute last resort of a man who might find himself in the dark with an empty rifle and an enemy an arm's length away. Nobody pretended a .25 would win a battle. Its whole value was that it existed at all, a final answer pressed against a body and fired when there was nothing else left to try. Some tunnel rats carried one for exactly the nightmare the job always threatened, being trapped underground, disarmed, and alone. These pocket pistols came home easily because they were easy to hide, tucked into a bag among the socks. Many were never registered, never mentioned, and never fired again. They simply went into a drawer, and the story of why a soldier had carried something so small went into the drawer with them. Number 1. And here, at last, is the only pistol the United States ever built specifically for the tunnels. It was called the Quiet Special Purpose Revolver, and almost no one has heard of it. The Army knew its tunnel rats were fighting with borrowed police guns and captured enemy pistols, blinding and deafening themselves in the worst possible place to be helpless. So its engineers built something new. It fired a special round that sealed its own gases inside the cartridge case and pushed a cluster of tiny shot out the muzzle, so that when a tunnel rat pulled the trigger, there was almost no flash and almost no noise, just a soft cough in the dark. A man could fire it inches from his own face and still see and still hear. Only a small number were ever made, issued for field trials before the war wound down, and then the revolver was quietly shelved, most examples recalled and destroyed. It is the rarest handgun in this entire countdown. A gun built for a war so strange that when it ended, the weapon vanished with it. The men who had crawled into the dark with the Army's blinding .45 finally had their silent gun, right when there was no longer anywhere left to carry it. 20 pistols, and almost none of them were the gun the Army meant for the job. They went into the earth with police revolvers and dead men's automatics, silent spy guns and Spanish cast-offs, and one strange quiet revolver built for them alone. They trusted their own judgment over the supply chain that armed them, because the pistol they were handed could blind and deafen a man where he could least afford it. Somewhere in your family there may be a piece of this. A revolver in a nightstand drawer, an automatic in an oiled rag, a capture paper in a box of old medals. If a father or grandfather brought a Vietnam pistol home, tell me in the comments, because those guns carry stories no catalog and no museum will ever record. Then look again at that old .45 from the start. It never once failed a man in the daylight. It simply asked the wrong thing of him in the dark, and 20 times over he answered by finding his own way through.